So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to attach your fabric to a rotating frame. You can use this method for the rotating frames, for a slate frame, any size, whatever you like. So yeah, I'll just go through what we have here. So there's the bits you get in your frame. I'll show you how to put them together later. Then I have my fabric, and I have some pins, I have some buttonhole thread, I have a needle for that thread as well, I have a scissors, then I have some string, and I also have a bracing needle, quite a large one there for the string as well, and I have some webbing, some herringbone webbing. Okay, so first thing you want to do is we're going to attach the top and the bottom of the fabric to the webbing that's on the frame there. Okay, so usually the two longer pieces of your frame will have the webbing attached, and we're going to attach the piece of fabric to that webbing. So you can use whatever kind of fabric you like. You don't want anything that stretches, because you're going to be stretching the fabric, so you don't want anything that's going to kind of stretch and distort. So here I'm just using a piece of calico, so nice simple fabric, so any sort of cotton or linen or anything, silk or whatever you like will do. So to begin, you want a piece that is going to fit on the webbing. Obviously, because we're sewing it to the webbing, you don't want it to be bigger than that, or it won't fit in your frame. But it can be longer than the side. Okay, so you want it to fit along the webbing, but it can be longer than the side of your frame. Okay, so to start off, I'm just going to fold over the ends that I'm attaching to the frame. I'm just going to fold them over about a centimeter or thereabouts. Just press that down with my fingers. So do that on one side, and then on the other side as well. Oh, sorry, hit the camera. So just pressing that down with my fingers. It doesn't need to be pressed with an iron or anything. Just fold it over and press with your fingers is fine. Okay, then they're the two ends that I'm going to be attaching to the webbing. So you can see here, I've already marked the halfway point on my webbing. So you're just going to measure the length of your webbing, and just wherever is halfway, you just want to mark it there. I've just marked it with a bit of pencil. And you also want to mark the halfway point on your fabric. Okay, so I'm just going to fold that in half, keeping that top fold we just put in there. So folding that in half, I'm going to mark that halfway point with a pin. Just popping it in there, and again with the other side. And then when you have those halfway points, you're going to line them up with the halfway point on the webbing, and you want the two wrong sides to go together. Okay, so you want the side with the fold on your fabric, the side that's folded, you want that to go to the back of your webbing. So if we call this the front, the part where you can see the staples in there, it's the back of the webbing you want to attach to. And you're just going to line up those two halfway points and then stick your pin in there. Okay, and then you are going to pin your fabric to the webbing all the way along, just fairly evenly spaced, about maybe an inch apart. Okay, so going from the center out one side, so all the way out to the edge there. And then again, going from the center out to the other side. So I have my fabric pinned on one side. Now I'm going to show you how to sew that down now, but if you, when you're doing this yourself, if you want to pin the other side as well first, you can do all of your pinning first and then do all of your sewing, or you can do everything on one side and then swap and do everything on the other side. Okay, it doesn't make much difference, completely up to you. So I'm going to take my buttonhole thread. I'm going to take a fairly long piece, about 50 centimeters maybe. And I'm going to thread that in my needle. So what I have here is a size 3 embroidery needle. So it's a nice big eye for getting that thicker thread through. And of course you want to have a knot in the end. And then again, starting at the center, so at that halfway point, just going in with your knot, stopping the thread there, and you're going to do the same one again just to secure that. Make sure you don't get caught around your pins. And then we're just going to over sew all the way along. So from the center out to one side, and then again the center out to the other side, like we did with the pins. Okay, so I'm just going to get in a little bit closer so that you can see how I'm stitching. Just move my things out of the way. So I'm just going over, stitching that thread or that fabric to the webbing. So you want your stitches about maybe 1/2 centimeter apart, maybe slightly less. And just pulling that nice and tight each time as well. And as you keep going with that, eventually your pins will start to get in the way. So just as you come up to a pin, you can take it out then and keep going. So all the way along, you're just going in from the front and out the other side. Now, as you're sewing with that thread, you may notice it starts to get a little bit tangled around itself. That's natural. What I find is the best thing to do is just lift up your frame and then just let the thread dangle and untwist itself there. Okay, and once it stops spinning, you can go back and use it again. Okay, so continuing on with that overstitch. Now, so I've gotten right out to the outer corner there. So to finish off, when you get to the end, or if you start to run out of thread, you're just going to do a few stitches in the same spot. So maybe 3 or 4, just to be sure. And then I also like to just slip my needle through on that last one just to catch it there. And then I can cut that off. And again, I'm going to come back to the center and just go out the other side, do the exact same thing. So again, with my knot in the end, I can take that pin out of the way, and just beside where I went in before, and again in that same place to start off with, get nice and secure, and again just over stitching out the other way. So now I have that one side done, that first side done. So you can see that's all stitched there. So I'm gonna go and do the same thing on the other side. So I already have my halfway points marked in there. So I'm just going to line them up, and again you're going to pin that fabric to the webbing first, and then you can go in and over sew the exact same way we did on the other side. Okay, so I'll come back to you when I have that done. So I have all of my stitching done on those two sides. So the next step is to put the sides on the frame. So this is kind of the top and the bottom, and now we've got to put the sides on. So these bits here just kind of slide into the gap here. So they can be a little bit tricky to get in. I find I'm just resting this end of it against my body and then just pushing that in. And once it's in place, it should be able to turn easily enough. And then again with the other side. So you have them sitting in there like that. And then of course on the other side. Okay, so as you can see, the fabric is longer than the bit on the side here. I was talking about that earlier. So you want the side with the webbing on it, you want to make sure your fabric is not bigger than that, or else it won't fit inside your frame. It's okay if it's smaller than that though. I mean, if you wanted to only have it kind of that big or even that big, you can. You don't need to go right out as far as that. And then with the side of it, you can have longer, because kind of the whole point of the rotating frame is that you can rotate the two ends and tighten that fabric. So you can see here the fabric is wrapped around those kind of longer arms, those longer sides, that top and the bottom. So you can work on all parts of the fabric. If I turn it this way, so I have the very beginning of the fabric there, and I have the rest of it all wrapped around this end. So I could start stitching from the top here, and as I work down, I can rotate my frame and work on the next section and keep going, work on the next section and keep going until I get to the other side. Okay, so that's the really handy thing about a rotating frame, is that you can work on a piece of fabric that's bigger than this. So yeah, so you want to, there's a bit of hair there, you want to have this kind of tight enough. You don't need it really tight, but tight enough. We're going to tighten it a little bit again later on. And at this point you want to put these screws in. So I prefer to put the top part on the bottom of the frame, so that when I lie it down it sits a bit easier, where if you have the kind of wing nut bit on the back, it kind of raises the frame a bit more. It doesn't sit as flat. So you're just going to put that in on the back and then screw this on. kind of tight. You don't need it really tight just yet. We're going to tighten them up again in a few minutes. And again, pop that in there, putting the washer on this side, and then the wing nut. So just getting all of them in place. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten up these two ends first, and then I'll have these ones a bit looser to tighten up properly later on. So I'm going to tighten this arm, and then I'll still be able to move this arm to really tighten that up. Okay, so to do that, you want to make sure that these bits are in as close as possible to that arm there. So see the way there's a good bit of a gap around there? You want to get that pushed in as, sorry, I made a shot. You want to get that pushed in as much as possible. So you may need to lean on something quite hard. I'm just going to turn this around here. I'm just going to lean on the end of my trestle here and show you. I'm just going to lean as hard as I can and really push that in so that there's not as much space in there, okay? You want to get that in tight as you can, and then yeah, that's looking pretty good. And then once you get that in tight, you can tighten up that wing nut as well. So the screw that's in here should not be twisting as you twist the wing nut, okay? That should stay in place. And again, on the other side. Pushing that in as tight as I can. A little bit more. Okay, so that's nice and tight there now. I'm just going to turn this back around so we can see. So this arm is nice and tight there. So the next step is to put some webbing on the end here. So I'm just going to take out my webbing. So this is herringbone webbing, and if I hold it up to the camera here, you might be able to see that it sort of has 4 sections. So you have the lines going one way, and then up the other way, and then down, and then up. Okay, so there's 4 different sections on that. So you want to have 3 of those sections. So that's 1, 2, 3 of those sections on the fabric, and 1 off the fabric. So one just on the side off the fabric, like that. Okay, so I'm gonna cut a length. So I want 3 of those sections on the fabric and 1 section off, just like that. I might zoom in there just so you can see. So you can see I have 1 section that's not lying over the fabric. Okay, and then what you're going to do is just pin that in place. So I'm going to take out my pins again and just directly across this way, trying to hold the webbing in place so that you still have that 1 bit of the fabric. And again, your pins roughly around 1 inch apart. So just pinning that all the way along. Right up. Oh, I've come a little bit too far off the fabric there. Right up to the end. Okay, and then again I'm going to go in with some buttonhole thread. So I'm going to be doing the same thing on the other side as well, but because it's the same thing, I'm just going to show you one side and then you do the same on the other. All right, so again, piece of buttonhole thread. And again, you want a knot in the longer end. Now I'm going to stitch in that kind of second section there. So if I get in a bit closer, so you can see there's 1 section, 2, 3, and then 4 is off the fabric. So in that second section, that's kind of the middle one on the fabric, if that makes sense. So I'm going to stitch my stitches mostly in that portion. Okay, so I'm going to start at the very top there. Catch my knot, and I'm just going to go in at that point again, just to secure that. And then I'm going to come down a little bit further, maybe what, 1/2 inch thereabouts. Just going to move that pin out of the way now, and I'm going to pull that nice and tight, and again in and out. Getting caught around the edge, and again pull that nice and tight. So you want that to kind of bunch up there. Okay, you want this to be as tight as you can pull it. So it's a slightly awkward position because this bar is in the way. So if you find it easier to bring that to the edge of your table and kind of work at it like that instead, then that's absolutely fine. But I'm gonna stay in the picture here and do it this way. So just doing that all the way along until you get to the other end. So just getting to the last one here. The very corner. And again, pulling that as tight as I can. So you can see that's really bunched that in along there. And on that last one, I'm going to do pretty much the same as I did at the start. And just going in to the same holes again, just to get that nice and tight and secure. And again, I'm just bringing my needle through that little loop and pulling that as tight as I can there. And then I can cut that away. Okay, so that's how you attach the webbing to the end there, to that side. So I'm going to turn this around and do the same on the other side, and then I'll come back to you when I have that done. Now, so I have my two sides of the herringbone done there, and the two sides of webbing done. Okay, remember I already tightened this one, so what I'm gonna do is just pull that as tight as I can. So because this one is tight, it should be staying in place, and then I'm gonna pull this, just rotate this one until it's nice and tight, and when I feel like that's tight enough, I'm gonna tighten up the screws on either end there as well. So I'll just do that quickly. So now I have both of these ends tightened, so my fabric is stretched this way. Now I need to stretch it this way. So to do that, this is where I use my string and my bracing needle. Okay, so your bracing needle is quite big and quite sharp, so be very careful with that one. And what we're going to do is we're going to sew the string through this edge of the herringbone webbing, the part that's away from the fabric. Okay, so you're only going through the webbing, you're not going through the fabric. All right, so I'm just going to thread that up. You don't need to cut a length because we're going to be pulling it back through as well. So just thread that, make sure you have a a bit to work with. And then I am actually going to move this to the edge of the table a bit, and you're just going to go through from the top to the bottom of your herringbone, pull a bit through, and then again you're going to go around this outside bar of the frame and go down again through the herringbone, about an inch apart roughly. Okay, and again making sure that you have the string coming over that bar through there. And just doing that all the way along. Oops. And I'm just going to pull some more string through. And we'll just keep going with that down to the very end. Now I can probably fit just about one more in, so I just get a little bit more string. And just fit the last one in the edge there. And now with that bit on the end, you want to leave yourself a little bit to work with. And we're just going to wrap that around the frame here. 2 or 3 times is enough. Oh, I haven't left myself enough string. So you just want to wrap it around the bars of the frame, and then you're going to do a slip knot under the piece here. So you're just kind of making a loop with the string there and passing it under. If I can get a hold of it, there we go. Okay, so you have that loop on that side then, and then you're bringing the end through that loop and just pulling that nice and tight. Okay, and then you can kind of pull this back through. You don't need to do it very tight, just pull it back through, and again make sure you have plenty of string to work with there, and doing the same thing on this side. And with your loop knot through here. So when you have that loop, just bringing that through there, so it's nice and tight. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, so I'll just do that very quickly. So now I have the string on both sides and I'm going to tighten them up now. So you're just going to pick one side to undo the knot at, and from the other side you're just going to pull that string as tight as you can. So if you notice, I'm pulling with one hand and then keeping that string tight with the other, okay? And you're really pulling that tight, and you'll see the effect on your webbing there as you pull that really tight. And again, you're just going to do your little wrap around here and that loop knot then. Okay, so that side is nice and tight, and I'm going to do the same with this side and get that nice and tight. You can see it's already pretty tight actually, but I'll just do the same on the other side. Now, sorry, I thought I heard a knock at the door. So the same on the other side. You're just going to undo one of your knots and pull from the opposite side, keeping that nice and tight. So wrapping that up at the end there, and again your slip knot. Now, so that's it done. That's your fabric framed up, and you can see that's really tight now. So you're ready to start stitching whatever you want to put on it. So I hope that was easy enough to follow. If you have any issues at all, just message me and I'll try to solve them for you. But yeah, so you can do that with pretty much any fabric. Just to if you're doing a design that's bigger than the hoops you have, it's a good thing to use a frame like this, or if it's just a different size to a hoop. Obviously a 10-inch hoop doesn't give you the length, the same sort of length. It's much more of a square piece of fabric that you need for a hoop. Or, you know, the other thing is it can just be a nice way to display a piece, something a bit different, something a bit interesting. If you wanted to just display your fabric, your piece of embroidery like that. But yeah, so all of those bits and pieces are going to be available in the shop. The frames already are at the moment, and I'm going to put together some kits with all those materials you need for framing up. So with your string and your buttonhole thread and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so you should be able to get them from the Bealice shop very soon. And yeah, so enjoy that and happy stitching.